Okay. Why did the JavaScript developer quit? Because he didn't get a raise. No? Really? That's all I'm going to get out of it. This crowd. This is a tough crowd. All right. So let's talk about Qwik. I have a few slides. I'm going to try to go quickly through the slides. And then I'm sure everybody wants to really see demos, right? Like that's why you're here, to see a bunch of demos. And by the way, I think of myself as a very friendly guy. So at any point, raise your hand or interrupt me, throw a tomato at me or something. It doesn't matter. Get my attention, and I'm happy to answer any question that you might have. If something doesn't make sense, I know I talk fast. Tell me to slow down or something like that. Anyways, that's me. I did this thing called Angular, JS and Angular, and now I just can't help myself, and I'm doing another framework called Qwik. I'm also a CTO of Builder.io. Builder.io is like, we do a headless visual CMS. I know a bunch of words that meant nothing to me when I joined. But let me break this down. So you know Wix? Wix is a drag and drop page builder. Okay, Wix is great. The problem is Wix has to be hosted on their domain, right? So if you're target.com or some real actual website that makes real money, you can't really be using Wix. So Builder.io is a visual editor that you can npm install into your existing projects. So your existing React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Qwik application that you happen to have, you install the Builder.io, and then you take your components and you can tell marketing department to like go and do whatever they want. So the marketing department can no longer has to tell you like, hey, I want to make it blue or red or 2 columns or whatever. That's what Builder does. So we have this awesome open source team. We do 3 things. We do Qwik, which we'll talk about today. We also do Partytown, which allows you to run your third-party code like Google Analytics, HubSpot, etc., in the web worker. So that's offloading code from the main thread. Basically, we think that applications will not be fast unless you get everything you can possibly get off of the main thread, right? So whether it's the application itself or the third-party code, that's what Partytown's for. And then we also have Mitosis, which allows you to make a design system. Like let's say you're a company and you have lots of teams and they use different frameworks. And now you have to develop your standard widgets for those frameworks. And you have to develop it in Angular and then React and then Vue and Svelte. So in Mitosis, you can write it once and it's available everywhere. Mr. Adam Bradley, he did this thing called Ionic. I'm sure you've heard of it. No? Yes, okay. And Manuel helped him, and he also did this thing called Jin, which is like Express, but for Go language, super popular, one of the most popular projects there. And Sammy is working on Mitosis. Anyways, okay, so why are we here? So what I want to convince you of is that sites speed matters and that most websites are horrible at it. So Google has this thing called Google PageSpeed Score, where they measure the performance of websites. It's when you're using Chrome is instrumented to collect anonymous performance metrics, and it sends it back to Google, and then Google will publish this for your website. And what I find interesting is that if you look at most e-commerce websites, they kind of all fail this miserably. Like most of them are in the red. And even the companies that try really, really hard and do a good job at it, like Amazon, even they, get it in a yellow. And so why is this so difficult? If this is so important, let me back up a second. If you're browsing Twitter or something and then you see a interesting product like a shoe and you're like, oh, I got to buy this, or, purse or whatever you're into. You click on it and it shows it to you and you're like, oh, look at the buy button, click. Nothing happens. Click again, nothing happens. I'm sure you had this experience, right? And at some point you're like, you know what, forget it. I really don't need this thing. And you leave, right? And so that's a sale that has been foregone, right? That's a sale that did not happen. And so if you can make the website interactive faster, your sales will go up. You will make more conversions, you'll make more profit, more money, etc. And if you don't believe me, like just imagine whether you would use a website where every single click would take 30 seconds. Would you use such a website, or would you walk away or go to the competition, right? And so speed matters, and it matters a lot. And it turns out that we all know this, and yet it's all red. So how come? What gives? And people love to say like, oh, your developers, you have crappy developers. You didn't buy, you should get better developers, and then you would have a fast website. Well, if that would be true, at least some companies would have good scores, but no company has a good score. And even the companies, they can certainly afford the most awesome developers like Amazon. Even they don't get the best possible scores, right? And so my argument here is that it isn't the developers, it's the frameworks that are making it too difficult to make a fast website. And so there's a specific reason why I think it's too difficult, and that is that the short answer is hydration. But before we get to that, the amount of JavaScript that we ship to the browser, this is over time. You can see in the last 10 years, this thing has just gone up, up, and up. And there are people who will try to convince you that like, oh, you developers just have to write less JavaScript. But that's not realistic. That's not going to happen, right? Because the site of today is a lot more interactive than the site of 10 years ago. And so nobody wants to go back 10 years in terms of the interactivity, right? So you want to have a rich site, but that means more JavaScript. So the problem isn't the amount of JavaScript we have. The problem is that the way our technology works today, all of that JavaScript has to show up eagerly at the beginning of the website for it to work, right? This is what hydration is, and I'll show it to you in a second. And so the trick here is not to somehow make less JavaScript, but somehow figure out how to ship less JavaScript to the browser so the browser isn't overwhelmed all at once. And I know people will say like, oh, but you could do this thing called lazy loading. And I'm going to convince you that lazy loading is a bit of a lie, because you can only lazy load components that are not currently in the render tree, right? If a component is in a render tree and you put it behind a lazy loaded boundary, well, guess what? Hydration is going to come to that boundary and be like, yeah, I need to go visit that component to figure out if there's a click listener over there or not. And so the hydration will eagerly load that component, whether you lazy load it or not. Okay, so these are a couple of frameworks that I picked, and I want to show you the performance of the framework versus on the other side over here. I guess I should just use the mouse here. On this side over here is the amount of JavaScript they ship, right? And what I want to convince you is that this graph is essentially the inverse of this graph, right? The more JavaScript you ship, the less performant your framework is. The less JavaScript you ship, the more performant your framework is. That shouldn't be a surprise. This is like, of course, like you want to see the fastest possible site? It's just pure HTML with no JavaScript. Ayub, how are you everywhere? Hi. He's my biggest fan. Everywhere I go, he is there. He's either the biggest fan or a stalker. I haven't decided which one. I am so excited you're here. Okay, so let's talk about hydration, because I think it's important to understand how hydration works, and then I'll show you a whole bunch of demos, right? Because you all want to see demos. And if something doesn't make sense, stop me, and I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, so how do we get to this problem? I think it's important to understand. And so the way we got this is before, all these JavaScript frameworks, we used to build applications, I guess in PHP or some other framework, right? And PHP is still popular to this very day. And it turns out PHP sites are actually performant in terms of rendering, but they have one particular thing that the developers don't like, and that is the fact that the back end is written in one language, PHP, and the front end is written in a different language called JavaScript, right? And you can't really bring JavaScript to the back end. Well, you can, because we do, but like PHP is not that. And you can't bring PHP to the front end, and so that doesn't mesh. And so people are looking for system solutions where it's JavaScript all the way down, right? It's just JavaScript. I don't want to think about anything else. And so this popularized a set of frameworks which you can think of them as a client-side rendering, which you can basically say like, hey, you know what? Forget the server-side business. We'll just do everything in the browser, right? And so for a while, we had this world where we shipped a blank page. And then this blank page had a script tag in it, which downloaded JavaScript, which then executed the application. The application would then render the content, and then you would see the thing that you would like to see, and then that would be interactive. You can click on it, and you can do some work. And the problem is that this white screen took many, many seconds before you got something. And this was boring and not a good user experience, right? So we said, like, we need to fix this. Like, if you want to have an e-commerce website where like speed matters, like this is not going to cut it. So what do we come up with? Well, we decided to execute the application on a server. And so the HTML we're sending now is much bigger, right? But the advantage is we get to see the application immediately. Like you get to see the app immediately as you get over here. And then we have no choice. So it appears faster, but then we have no choice but to download the JavaScript again, execute the application, and re-render the application again. Except this time we're going to call it a fancy term called like reconciliation, right? Because we're going to try to reuse the DOM. But it's really just rendering, because if you send it the wrong HTML, after reconciliation is done, it will be the correct HTML. So really, you're just replacing it with the correct thing. And the end result is the page we have, and now you can click on it. And so it's actually slower because you sent more stuff to the browser, right? So like you're in this world where like the page appears faster, but it takes longer for you to interact with. And so if you think about it, there is duplicate information being sent. If you take the string, like visually build your tech stack, this string is found twice, once in this HTML and once again in JavaScript. And basically everything is found twice because the JavaScript you sent is sufficient to completely rebuild the page. This whole HTML is unnecessary if you think about it. Well, we know it's unnecessary because it works with blank page, right? The only reason it's there is because we don't want the user to kind of be staring at a white screen. Okay, so why does it work this way? So there is this thing which we call hydration, right? And hydration, fundamentally, what it's trying to do is it's trying to figure out where are the listeners, right? And the way the hydration works is you start at the root component right here, and then you go and visit every single child, and you come to this component and it's like, oh, look, this component has a listener, so I will register a listener. And then you go to the next one and you're like, oh, this component has a listener. And then you go and visit all the other ones, right? You kind of visit, and then finally you're done. And this takes time. This is the reason why you're staring at the white screen or your temporary screen that doesn't work without the click listeners until you figure this out. And so this is a known problem. And so people are trying to figure out different solutions for this thing. So one solution is to basically what Astro does, which is to break the world into smaller islands and then recognize that some of these islands are static. They have no listeners. And those we don't have to hydrate at all. And maybe then recognize the fact that, oh, like maybe this button here is something people click on. So we only do it when you hover the mouse over it or you scroll it into the view. And if it's not scrolled, then we don't do it, right? And so you have kind of a lazy world of lazy hydration. So with this world, it's definitely an improvement. You have less work to do, but you have a new problem, and that is that imagine that this button here is add to shopping cart, and this is your shopping cart right here. And this typically happens because the button is somewhere in the bottom of the page, and the shopping cart is in the corner, which means the common root element is far away from you. And so now you have a problem, which is like, well, how do you get these things to communicate? Normally the answer is like, well, you share state between the two, and that's how they talk to each other. But you can't share state because they're two separate islands. And so now you have an inter-island communication problem. And there are solutions to that, but the solutions usually involve something other than the normal way of talking to other components. And so it's an overhead for the developer because, if you talk to a component next in the same island, you talk to it this way. If you talk across islands, you talk some other way. And then if you want to refactor and decide like, oh, I want to join islands or break, like it's crazy, right? And so this is not a really, in my opinion, scalable solution. It works great for certain kind of applications, but not for all kinds. The other solution is React Server Components. And what they do is they basically say, how about we render some of these on a server and the rest we do on the client? And then because we kind of do this split, actually this line should really be around the whole thing like this. Because we do that split, the advantage is that we get to keep it mentally as a single application, right? And so React Server Components is kind of pushing this particular idea. So let me show you how resumability is different. So I'm going to propose a completely different way of doing this. Okay, so you sent HTML just as before, and the HTML renders the application. But Inside of the application is additional attributes that contain information about where all the listeners are. And because you have all the information about listeners, this page is interactive immediately. You can click on it. You don't know what's going to happen yet, but you can click on it and you're guaranteed that that particular click will be processed because you know there's a listener, you've queued it up and you're ready to go. And then you download the associated JavaScript, so this is faster, and you say, well, yes, but you're cheating. This is a smaller box. Why is the box smaller? Well, because we don't do hydration, I don't need all this stuff. As a matter of fact, we can remove all the duplicates. So the JavaScript is much, much smaller. And because the JavaScript doesn't even show up, we can't even execute it even if you wanted to. And therefore, there is no reconciliation. We're just directly taking the HTML as is and attaching the listeners and making the application work. And so not only is this appear faster or appears the same speed, is actually faster because you can interact with it all the time. And you say, well, has anybody done this before? And the answer is yes. So there's a couple of companies who do this. One is Google. And you've used Google Search, Google Photos, Google Flights. Have you used any of those applications? Have you ever been in a situation where like the search wasn't ready for you? No. That's because that's what they do under the hood. Now, the framework they use is called Wiz. Wiz is an old framework. It's about 10 years old. It doesn't have quite the DX that people expect of today, so it's unlikely that this will ever be open source. It's also very tied to the way Google infrastructure works. So it's unlikely that Google will ever open source that, even though it would be really, really nice because they had it for the last 10 years. And so Qwik was kind of inspired by this particular idea. But again, Qwik was not the only one. There's another company called eBay. eBay has a framework called Marco. And Marco also does these kinds of tricks. And it is also very, very fast in what it does. Again, not the most popular because I think the React, this idea of the JSX as in like code first and embed HTML into it, I think that one won. I think the other frameworks which are like, no, it's all about the HTML with some markup. I don't think these things are, it doesn't seem like the market wants this, right? Because if you look at what's popular, it's the JSX style of things. So the thing about resumability is that it flips the problem upside down. Instead of saying the root of the component is the entry to my application and then like go and visit every single place, it says, no. The entry to the application is the click listener. If you don't click something, nothing's happening. If the click listener is not present, why is the code here, right? So one of the things that Qwik does is somehow rearrange the source code to your application so that the entry point to your app is the listener, not the root component. Everybody else, the root component is the thing that says render root component, and then all the other components don't have to even be exported, right? Qwik kind of flips this upside down, and I'll show you how this works. And so because the listener is the root of the whole thing, you can very quickly see that like many components are just unreachable from that listener. And because those components are unreachable, they just never download and they never execute and they just never do anything. And so this is basically a better mental model. So I'm going to skip these slides. I'm going to actually just go to this particular slide, and then I'm going to show you demos. Okay. So there's always trade-offs. So what is the trade-off? Like, how do we, what are we giving up here, right? Okay. So here's the thing. The trade-off is you need to buy into two concepts. One is signals, and the second one is code extraction. So this is represented by the $sign. And so here's the deal. If you use Qwik and you buy into these two concepts, then Qwik will in return give you an O of 1 startup, meaning it doesn't matter how complicated your application gets, the startup is always going to be constant. That is crazy, right? Because unless you actually click on something, there's nothing to do. And if you click on something, you can really only click on one thing at a time, right? You can't interact with the whole app all at once. It's not possible. That's not how apps work, right? And so the startup cost is really proportional to the complexity of the interaction you're about to do and has nothing to do with how complicated the application itself is. And I'm going to argue that most interactions are about equal in complexity. And so it's O of 1. The other thing the framework gives you out of the box without even trying is lazy loading and lazy execution. JavaScript just does not execute in Qwik unless there is just no other code path to be taken, right? And this is just out of the box. This is not something you have to opt in or think about or design your code in a specific way. It's just how it works. And I think at this point, people will say like, oh, but I can do that in my framework. Like in React, I can use memo. And I'm going to say not the same thing, because use memo only works after you have successfully executed everything once, because use memo has to memoize, right? And so at least once you had to execute the whole world, and then use memo will do its magic. But by that point, it's too late. You already paid the cost of like downloading everything and executing everything, right? The thing I'm talking about here is you don't even execute anything until you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to stop with the slides and let's do some demos. So I have already went through and I ran npm create quick add latest, and it's our startup. You kind of follow through, and you're going to end up with a project that looks like this. And in here, we're going to do sorry, I always get confused. I have this command called nr, which really is just npm run dev, because it's too much typing. So I always type nr. Okay, so you run this, and now you get a local host. So let me do localhost 5173. Oh, we got a new background. Somebody changed the homepage. Look at that. Oh, no. This is not the new background. This is the new thingy. Okay. So here's our starter. And so we basically have a new page, and yeah, let's go to the network, and I'm going to refresh. And so let's make this bigger. And there is these two files, client and environment, and these are actually files from Beat. Beat does hot module reloading and bundling and all this stuff for us. This is in dev mode. In production, these files don't exist. So I'm going to go and say -beat. They're not here. And so what I'm showing you is like, look, this page has no JavaScript. Yeah, that's not exciting. Your framework can do that too if you tell it not to ship JavaScript. But I'm going to show you like how it gets interesting from it. So let me see if I can split the page, and I'm going to try a couple of new things. So you can do, there's a quick command that we get, and what is the new command? They just added it. Quick add page, is it? No, sorry, there's a brand new command that was just added, and I don't remember what it is. Lifer, do you remember what it is? It's very new, right? Okay, what it is. Let's embarrass ourselves. Let's find this. Quick build. Quick new. Quick new. And then that's right. Quick new route. And let's make a new route called Barcelona. Okay. And so here's where my server is running. And so this command didn't actually do that much. If you go to source, if you go to routes, and if you go to where's Barcelona? Route component. No, why? Oh, no, not component. No, route. What? Why did you create a component when I asked for route? Okay. Okay, I'm demoing a new component, and it is not. Okay, so here's the route /bcn. Okay, I just created a file, like this file with this inside of it. So it's nothing really much. I am going to do it manually next time until I figure out how to use this command. Okay. Here's a component. So let's go to /bcn, and here is our text new route. Notice we have a footer and a header, right? That's because we have a layout. So there is a layout TSX, and this layout sets up, where is the layout? A header and a footer and all kinds of things for us. So there's already a whole bunch of components running. There's also a router component. And oh, by the way, this particular layout seems like it's using the current time to show you that it's actually re-rendering, right? The time changes every time you refresh. Nevertheless, no JavaScript shows up because this page just doesn't need any JavaScript. So why would you send anything? So let's go back to our BCN and let's make something here. So let's make a button, right? Hello on click and console.log. And let's just say hello. Okay. Okay, here we go. So now we have a button. No JavaScript still, and yet we have an interaction. So what happens when I click on it? Click, that's when the code shows up, right? So the code didn't show up until I clicked on it. But notice what showed up. Nothing but the thing that absolutely had to show up, right? The only thing that downloaded was really just a function that says console log hello, because that's the only thing that you need. Actually, even the framework didn't show up. There is no framework, because in this particular case, like, why do you need a framework? So the only thing that showed up, it was literally just that function and nothing else. Now your framework cannot do that, right? So how does this work? How can I click on a button and how it actually prints hello? So the way this works is, look at the button. The button has an on click in here, and this on click has a URL where the code should be loaded from. And then once the URL gets loaded, right, there is the name of the symbol that has to be downloaded, right, executed. So this particular URL will have a file that exports this symbol. So if I go to the network tab and I click here, you see that this symbol name right here, right, that's the symbol name that's in here. And that's how the system know what to do. It basically says, hey, there's a button and it has this attribute. You download this and you execute that, right? That's simple. But browsers don't know how to do on-click at the beginning. So instead, we have this thing called a quick loader. And the quick loader is a small amount of JavaScript. It's about 1 kilobyte in size that executes in like a millisecond on a desktop and maybe 10 milliseconds on a mobile device. Okay. And all this thing does is basically sets up a polyfill that listens for events. And if the event is clicked, like a click, bubbles up, this thing captures it, goes back to the DOM, says, is there an on-click anywhere in here? It finds the on-click, figures out what to dynamically import, what to execute, calls it a day. It's that simple, right? And I know what you're going to think at this point. You're going to say like, yeah, that's cool, but in production, that's going to mean that like if you're on a slow device and you're going to click on something, you're going to have to wait for the JavaScript to download, and then who wants to have a slow application like that? So let's talk about how it's a little bit different in production. So what happens in production? So let's go to a production. Actually, sure. I want to, I forgot the URL. I think it's Woot. Is it Woot? No, Whoop. Oops, that's not. Is that it? No. Sorry, I forgot the name. There's a very cool website I want to show you that is built with Qwik. And Whoop, sorry, this is the website. And I think it really showcases this well. So here's the website. This one is built with Qwik. And let's go to the network tab. No JavaScript, right? And watch me. As I'm scrolling, more and more code shows up, right? So the code isn't showing up. So the reason why more and more code shows up is because many of these components have like interesting interactivity on it. And notice that the JavaScript only shows up when it's, let's do it again. Actually, let me just go to the top. Here, refresh. Let me zoom out this thing for a second. Whoa. Okay. So I'm on top. Okay. Why? Okay. So now as let's only show Q dash. So as I'm scrolling, you can see that more and more code is showing up, right? Because these components are coming into the view, and these components say, hey, I need to do mouse over, right? This is a mouse over thing. I need to do another mouse over. And so new behavior is loading. Now, the thing to see in here, I know it's kind of zoomed out. I don't know if you can see it, but notice that all of these things are hitting service worker. There is a service worker that is prefetching all the code that you could potentially need and pushing it into the cache of the browser. So that when you go and finally say, I need this code, notice the times here. These times are all 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds, maybe 3 milliseconds. And that's because all of these times are coming out of a cache. They're all cache hits, right? So in production, what happens is you navigate to a website, immediately a service worker that is inside of here, let me zoom out, again. There's a service worker that comes with Qwik. This service worker goes to the cache storage and pre-populates all of these things. They show up immediately. You show up, bang, I start downloading them immediately, right? And then when you actually need this particular code, where is it, network tab? When you actually need it, as you scroll, they show up. So that's pretty cool. But let me show you something that's even cooler. One thing is like, yes, but like there's so many symbols. How do we know which symbols need to go together? Because oftentimes you need more than one thing. And so this is something that we are working on, and this is our storefront. And so what we do is we collect statistical information on all these symbols. Let me zoom out. So it's hopefully it can be seen. Okay, so I know that is matrix. Can you see this matrix? You can kind of see it. Okay, so this is basically a matrix of every single symbol that's needed in the client against all the symbols that are, the same symbol twice. So this thing in the center is talking about itself. And these colors show probabilities of how likely it is that you're going to need that other symbol if you needed this one, right? And now that you have this, you can create bundles. And so you can say like, oh yeah, these symbols need to go together. These symbols need to go together. And, all these things get set up in such a way that, and then all this information gets fed to the service worker. So when you navigate to the page, the service worker will always be ready for you, data available. We don't have this feature yet, but one of the things that we would like to do, and it should be relatively straightforward now that you have service worker, is to basically tell the service worker, you know what? I want you to load it in a specific order. It is more likely that you're going to click on this button right here, that's the buy button, than is you're going to click on a sign out button, right? And so make sure that piece of code loads first, and then the sign out loads later. Unless you, of course, you click on a sign out, then the service worker should automatically reprioritize and start fetching the next thing that it needs, right? I'm going to argue that stuff like this is not even discussed with other frameworks. Like other frameworks can barely like do lazy loading across route boundaries. The idea of being able to do this fine-grained, matrix of figuring out what probability of things what you have, this is just like not available anywhere else. But let's go back to our code. So I explained how it works. I explained to you that this is not going to be a problem in production, that things are going to be super, super fast. And I showed you this idea of streaming, like this idea that there's only so many things that the user can interact at any given time, right? And so what you want is you want the service worker to be a step ahead of you. They want to be like, oh, as of right now, the only thing you can possibly do are these things. So I want to make sure this piece of code is available. And then when you click on something and you open up another dialog box, and the service worker is going to be like, okay, now you can do this bunch of other things. Let me go get more code, right? And so the service worker is always a step ahead of you. So as you interact, the service worker is fetching this stuff. And of course, we can tell the service worker to say like, well, if you're on a mobile device that's using LTE or 5G, why don't you not prefetch everything all at once, because we want to save on the data. But if you're on a desktop, like just download the whole app, right? You can do that. This is something that is not really possible with any other approach. Okay, so let's go back to how Qwik works. So we have now a button, but the button is not really that interesting, right? Because a button needs to do something more interesting. Let's make another button that is going to add a value. So let's say we have count.value and we want to do plus plus. So let's make a count. Okay. Oh, 2 pluses. Yeah. And of course we have to, I always forget to print the count value. Okay, so let's count that value. Okay, so now we have a counter, right? The thing that's easy to understand about this function. So what happened, just to kind of be clear, is that this function got extracted. The reason it got extracted is because of this $sign. What the $sign does is it says every time there's a $sign, the compiler rearranges your code and does this. Export const click handler equals this, right? And now you can import a click handler, and now you can invoke the click handler, right? If the click handler is buried in this piece of code over here, then there's no way to get a hold of that click handler, right? Like, how are you going to get a hold of it? The only way to get a hold of it is to get a hold of this component, and then component has to be executed. But if I execute the component will probably have props, and those props come from the parent, so I have to execute the parent first. And that one has a parent. And so next thing you know, I'm at the root, and executing all the parents just so I can get to this component, just so I can get to the listener and do some work, right? And so what the $sign does is tells the system to refactor the code in this particular format, right? But now we have a problem. Look at this. If I copy this code and paste it over here, where is the count supposed to come from? And that's the hard magical part that Qwik solves. So let me just delete this and let me prove to you that it solves that. So first of all, notice I put a render in here. Those of you who are React developers will say, okay, so it's going to print render on a server, right? That is not surprising. And now you're going to be like, okay, but it's going to print render on the client because hydration runs, right? No render. So what do you think is going to happen when I hit +1? Will I see a render? You think, okay, how many people think I'm going to see a render? Just 1, 2? Ah, okay. What just happened? Why did it jump into it? Okay, console, here, +1. The count is working, right? No render. Let's just look what just happened here. So when I hit +1, let me refresh this again. I downloaded the code, the count value ++. And I showed you how count didn't exist. And so I have to recreate the count. And so there's a piece of code called, use lexical scope that knows how to do this magic, basically knows how to restore the closed over variables. And so it restores count so that you can do count value ++. And so how does it know what the value of count is? We know it's 123, but how does it know that? Well, if you look into this button, you're going to see that, again, we have this URL, we have the expression, and we have a 0 on the end. You see the 0 in the brackets? This 0 points to the state of the system. So this state of the system basically says 0, if you look over here, is an object with 12. The 1 on the end actually is a pointer to the next line, but it's 12. And so the system knows that 12 happens to be a signal. So it says, aha, I have to create a signal. And so what's inside of the signal that 1 points to this location over here? Well, the inside of the signal is 1, 2, 3, because that's what it is. It's a signal 1, 2, 3, right? So what it knows is that in order for you to go and call that function, that signal, to be incremented, it has to restore the value 1, 2, 3 from the state of the system. And so it serialized this for you. So that's nice. But when I modify the signal, how do I know what to re-render? And so signals have subscriptions. And so in this particular case, the subscription here says something about number 8. So let's go to the count and notice what this has over here. It has a number 8. In other words, what this says is that if you go and update that signal, then you also have to go and update the DOM to increment, the number 8. And so notice what didn't download. The component itself. The component that we had, right, that we made, didn't actually download, right? It's unnecessary. The system kind of looked at this, reasoned about it, and said, you don't need the component. I can do what you want me to do. I can behave the way you intended me to behave, and I don't have to download the component. And so it's not just this component that didn't download. Remember, this component has a header and a footer and a router above it, and there's a whole bunch of other components that are sitting above us. As a matter of fact, if you go to the elements, every time you see a QV, that's a component. There's a lot of components sitting above us. And all of those components, the system decided you don't need. They're not necessary, at least not necessary right now. But what if I move this console here and if I say count.value? What do you think I'm going to print? So on a server, clearly I'm going to print 1, 2, 3. What do you think I'm going to print on the client? Now I've changed the rules of the game. Now I said, I want you to print the console, right? And so the system, again, does the correct thing. Does exactly what you intended it to do. But this time, I had no choice. I had to send the component down because that's where the console log was, right? So now the console log is forcing us to download the component. And so what the nice thing about Qwik is that you really don't have to think about it as a developer, right? Like, what do I optimize? When do I optimize it? Etc. The right thing just happens. And I want to show you an interesting bit, which is that, let's take this count here. And let's create a display. Perfect. And whoa, wait, what are you doing? Okay. And so here I'm going to say count value, right? Whoa, number. And then, oh yeah, I can just do this, can't I not? Oh. Okay, so it's just a number. So this is a common count. Okay. Count dot value. Okay. So this is the common thing to do, is that you have state above, but the children are below. And so if you do this, almost all frameworks, there are some exceptions, but almost all frameworks will basically cause the component that contains the state to re-render. And then as you're passing the data down to the children, all the components in its path will render as well. So let's see what happens in our case. Console, refresh, +1. Obviously, it's working, right? The way it's supposed to be. What did we download? We downloaded the listener, the framework itself. Oh, there's this build file, which tells you what mode we're in. And that's it, nothing else. None of these components came down because the system looked at it and says like, oh yeah, but like this click here just updates this value there. And so you don't need anything else. Well, why ship anything else, right? That's not how your frameworks, the frameworks you use today, work. They basically ship everything, execute everything, and they executed everything all the time. This is why the console log was such a surprise, right? Like, it's not just the way we think about it. Okay, so I want to show you more cool things. So let's make a clock now. So let's make a component, clock, and let's say const time equal use signal. Yeah. No, let's just say loading. When people are looking at you, it's so hard to type. It's so hard to spell. Okay. Okay, so we have a component and we have loading, right? And so now it just says loading. It's going to become a clock in a second. But remember how this 1, 2, 3 here had to be serialized because it was a signal, right? The signal here. So let's see what did we serialize this time. So quick JSON. So we serialized the 1, 2, 3. But what I don't see over here is loading. Loading is not here because the system looked at it and said, yes, but there is nothing that mutates the loading. It is impossible for the loading or the time signal to ever change. And as a result, I'm not going to serialize it. Why? It cannot mutate, right? And so let's make it mutable. So let's create a use visible task. It's kind of like use effect. There are reasons why it's called different. We can get into it later. Let's see. Did you create the right stuff? Set interval. No. That's not correct code. One day autopilot will get this. Okay, so we are going to have an update function that just updates the time, right? We're going to call it initially to update the current time, and then every second afterward, going to call it as well. Yeah, there should be a cleanup over here, but I'm going to ignore it for a second. You can do a cleanup, but just for simplicity. And so now we have a clock that shows up. And so if you go to the network tab, obviously JavaScript has to show up eagerly because that's what you said. You said you wanted a clock that updates every second, and this is the only way I can possibly, the framework can achieve this, and so you're getting this particular behavior, right? Now let's look what gets downloaded. What gets downloaded is the use visible task, right? This is the only thing that gets downloaded is the use visible task, the framework, and of course this build thing. This component right here, the clock component right here, not not getting to the client. As a matter of fact, if I do console log render clock, it renders on a server, not on the client, right? This console here, let's see, where's the console? Nothing here, right? So how does this work? Like, what's the mental model to think about? And so the mental model to think about is, you know how virtual machines work? This is your physical machine, right? And inside of it, you open up a virtual machine. And inside of there, you boot up and you watch BIOS come up, and then a Linux kernel comes up, and you get a login screen, you log in, and your desktop loads up. And then in the desktop, you click on an email client and you start writing an email. And then you save the virtual machine and you get a file. And you take that file and you send it to your friend. And your friend opens the file inside of their virtual machine, and they don't watch the boot up, they don't watch the kernel, they don't watch the login screen, they don't watch the desktop loading, they don't open the email client. It's just email client opens up with the email cursor blinking at the next character, right? You skipped everything that was in front of it. All of that in front of it didn't matter, right? You're only interested in what's the next character that you're about to hit. This is literally how Qwik works. Qwik, you execute the application on a server. You serialize everything I showed you, like in a DOM or in the HTML, or there's different modes for it. And then you put everything inside of the HTML. Everything you need is inside of the HTML, and you ship it to the client. And the client just continues exactly where the server left off. Sorry. The client continues exactly where the server left off, right? And because you're continuing where the server left off, you don't need to download code. You don't need to execute signals or anything like that. You already know what the graph of dependency for the signals is, what to update when, and you can basically ignore the components that are in between. And so that's basically the mental model. You should just think about how virtual machines work. That's literally how Qwik works. I used to have this amazing demo, which is currently temporarily broken, but I need to fix it. And the amazing demo was that you get it working, you get some application like a to-do list working, and then you go to the command line and you basically type pause here. There's a special pause, whatever. It's mistyped. You type in pause, and it saves everything back to the HTML. You grab the HTML and open up Safari, paste the HTML into the Safari, and the application keeps running. And it not just keeps running, it's exactly in the state it was when you captured it from Chrome, right? Because the system has this particular property. The reason why the demo is broken is because we wanted to make the framework smaller, and so we decided to take this, the serialization code only exists on a server now. The client doesn't know how to reserialize, but we're going to figure out a way to like lazy load it or do something, because like it's such a cool demo that it is worth it to kind of show how it works. Okay, so we showed that. Oh yeah, we showed the clock, and we showed that the clock, is this working? Oh, that was working. Okay, we showed that the clock has to eagerly download the code, right? There's no other way around it, right? And of course, if I click other things, notice more code downloads, right? Like that's just how the system works. So let's do something that should really impress you. And I want to hear style, height. Okay, now the clock is below the fold. Where's the JavaScript? You guys are such a tough crowd. If I didn't have my fanboy over here. Okay, look, no JavaScript, right? But is it going to work if I scroll into the view? Look at that, right? This is what you want, right? This is how everything should have worked from day one. I don't know how we got to the mess we are currently in. This is how it was supposed to be working, okay? So, and this is why the demo I showed you earlier over here, why it behaves this way, right? If I scroll to the top on the page, this is why it behaves this way, is that, as new components are showing up, coming into the view, the system is loading more and more of the code, right? The code basically shows up as the components come into the view. It's because, well, it's just how Qwik works out of the box. There was nothing specific, nothing special I had to do in my code. The only thing that kind of gives it away is that this says use visible task, and there is the reason why it's called use visible task. You can think of it as use effect, but use effect has certain things that are sufficiently different that will confuse people, and that's why we made a new thing. So first of all, we have a use task that runs both on a server and on a client. Okay, and the running on a server is important, whereas use effect never runs on a server, right? And so we run in both places. And then we also needed something that exclusively only runs on the client. And so that's the use visible task to kind of imply, like, unless it's visible, it's not running. And on a server, things are not visible, right? Now, in this particular case, the visible task runs on visibility, but you could also have it run like eagerly on document load, etc. Those are also options. But typically you use something like this to figure out how to center something, or like compute the width or height or how many icons or whatever. And you really only need to do that if the component is visible. So if it's not, we don't need to do that. Okay. Oops. So we have our cool website, and I wanted to show you that we have lots and lots of integrations. So we have Auth.js, Builder, we can Cypress integration, image optimizations. Oh yeah, this is super cool. Ooh. Let me show you image optimizations. This is so cool. Okay. Oh, here's Manu. I love Manu. Here we go. Manu. All right. Okay. So let's put Manu over here. Manu is amazing. Okay. So notice it's screaming at you already, saying, hey, you don't have width or height attributes, right? And the reason why this is screaming at you is because if you go to the application, yes, why is it? Okay, notice what happened. Notice the red box around the image with the little yellow box over here. It's basically telling you, hey, layout shift happened over here. You messed up. We cannot help you with the layout shift. That's on you. That's on CSS. And so it says image size is unknown until loaded, causing a layout shift. To solve this problem, set the height and width of the image. How about we just fix it for me? Autofix. Look at that. And now when you go here, it disappears. You like that? Yeah. Okay. Oh. Okay. So let's do something else. Let's do save image as. Okay, let's save it to how do I get there? What am I? Oh, this is travel. How do I do the desktop? Downloads. No, desktop. Where's desktop? Oh, here's desktop. No? Wait, what? Oh, this is an iCloud. What? Where is the path to this thing file? No, it's Qwik app. Yeah. So, oh, sorry, it's not desktop. It's what? How do I not know how to use my computer? Here we go. Here we go. Miško Qwik app, public, save, and let's call this Manu. Let's save him. Okay. And so now if we go here, and so here we have, oh, there's already a file here. Ooh, I didn't realize there's a file here. Okay, that's funny. Okay. So here, the Manu needs to go into media. And index tsx. No, where were we? Buster. Here we go. Sorry. So let's get a hold of Manu. So import Manu from what is it? Slash media slash Manu. I think it's JSX. This is the first time I'm doing it. See if I'm going to get this right. So now I'm going to delete the image here. Manu. Yes, I think that's going to work. And so now he is still there. Is he? Let's see if this worked. No. Why is it not running? Yeah, media thunder underscore question mark JSX. You get the thing and you write it. Okay, so that's what I did. Media Manu JPEG. Okay, do I have to restart the server? Okay. Ah, here we go. Yes, it worked. So Manu is here. So there's an image. It automatically has async. There's loading. There is a source set so that on different devices widths, the correct size of the image gets downloaded. We have the width and height set, and the server part of the build time generated all the different images that you need for your thing. So now your image is optimized, right? It was kind of easy, wasn't it? Like all we did was drop the image inside of the media and was available over there. We also have a on-peak image optimization. If, for example, you're using a third-party CDN like Shopify, or there's other ones, Cloud.Runner, Cloudflare, there's a whole list of them over here. So if you don't want to host the images yourself and do this magic, we can point to other CDNs and load the images and generate the source set and sizes and everything you need for them as well. So that's the image optimization, because you got to have that. Internationalization. Forms, we have monorepo, Panda CSS. Ooh, this is my favorite. Panda CSS. Okay, let's see. nr quick add panda. Is this how you add it? Panda CSS. CSS. And I just want to double check something because, yep, that's all good. Okay. What is it? So, these are styles that are inlined. The problem is that it's super large, right? And so you want to have something nice. And so what you want to do is you want to wrap them in CSS like this. Oops, not capital CSS. And put this in the class. And then this imports. Oh, I have to restart the server, I think, again, because I installed new thing. And this needs to import. Change. No, I don't want to change. I want you to import. Finish what? Ah, okay. Asking questions. I don't know. I wasn't expecting a question. Okay. Now I have to wait for NPM to do its magic. Okay. Maybe I should tell some bad jokes. How do functions break up? Oh, did I say this already? Yeah. I did. They stop calling each other. Okay. Bang false. Like this, not false. It's funny because it's true. All right, it's installed. All right, let's see. Okay, now, yes, import CSS. There we go. Here we go. So now we still have, there we go. We still have the clock. And if you look at this div over here, notice it was replaced with a style sheet, and these are atomic style sheets, so it like breaks it up, gives it names, etc. I believe in dev these are friendly names, but in production they get broken up into hashes. So you get all the advantages of like CSS in JS without all the problems of CSS in JS. So there is no runtime cost. It correctly SSRs and generates your output, and everything just works. Okay, let me show you one more cool thing. Quick add React. Oh, more jokes. You guys are like, no, please, NPM finish. Okay. All right, where are we? Demo React. Okay, so go to React. So, these, yes, show table. What's up with this? I have to restart the server again. It's broken. What? What's going on? Yes, So why are you complaining? What? Okay, now it's working. Why did the server not restart? What was up? Okay, I guess the server took forever. Okay, so here is a material design slider. This is a regular slider. Material design component and a table that, okay, the CSS is messed up. But let's see. So we have a Qwik component, and inside of the Qwik component, we are using a slider. This material UI slider comes from a separate file, and this material UI is just, look at that. You take a regular slider from material UI, and you Qwikify it, and you get the Qwik version of it. And this file is processed using the React semantics because of the comment in the top. And you can have even complex things like tables, etc. And so if you look at the network tab, notice no JavaScript, but when I hover over certain things, the React lazy hydrates. So basically, this is like Astro, in essence. This basically behaves just like Astro, that creates islands for you. But in this particular case, with Astro, there's no easy way to talk between islands, like it's up to you to solve. But here, you can just use Qwik to talk between islands, right? So in our demo, let's see, let me show you. So we have a select, and this particular selector has a variant value, right? And this variant is bound to the material UI slider. So we're talking between each other. So notice no JavaScript, and as long as I don't hover over it, no JavaScript should load. But if I then change it, notice that this UI changed. Let me show this again. Notice the slider button will change its outline, and basically now you can see that the JavaScript had to download. So the React had to hydrate, come up, and was told to change the way the component is rendered, right? And so the component then re-renders on the client. So you get lazy hydration, and you get communication between islands inside of Qwik. So you can take your existing React components and libraries, etc., and you can bring them to Qwik and use them here. For example, I was building an app the other day, and I need authentication, and there was a library that already had the login screen ready, but it was in React, wrapped it in Qwikify, threw it in there, and it's fine. It's just for login, and you have it. What else did I not cover? Party down, story block, style vanilla, super base solvent, test Tauri. Where's Tauri? Oh, yeah, server functions. Okay. Thank you. That's why he's here. Okay. So actually, let's make a new demo. Again, we'll just use this one. So here we are back into our Barcelona. Okay, you know what? I'm going to make a new one. New file, server.index.psx. Okay, and q.component. Default. Okay, so I'm going to go back to server here. Okay, so now we have our hello component, right? It's just nothing really that interesting. So let's create a button in here. Why are you not liking this? Oh, this is it? Oh, that's kind of weird. Okay, and then let's make another button. Yes. Okay. Import. Okay. What? Why are you not? Oh, because it's okay. Okay. So we have this, and then this button here says, okay. So if I click the amazing button, it actually, let's go to network. Let me see if I can get both of them. Okay, here we go. And okay, let me make this a little bigger. I'm gonna make this. Can you still see it even if I make it a little smaller? So I just set that both sides are over here. Okay, so here's the click button, and two buttons, and one changes the state. Right? Nothing really impressive so far. I don't like the way it's like formatting my output, but let's ignore this. Now, let's say that we have something that's expense like this. If toggle.value, then console.log expensive. And let's say it is so here we're printing the word expensive only when it's here we're just doing click, but if I do false, and now it's printing out expensive, now it's not, right? So let's say the expensive is something that's actually expensive and it needs to be lazy loaded. How do we lazy load in Qwik? So let's first refactor this and make a function called expensive. And then we call the function like this. Right? So far, I haven't really done anything, right? It still works the same as before. If I want to lazy load this thing, I'm just going to wrap it inside of $sign. Okay. Now, when I first click on amazing, notice if I look at the code that ran, the expensive part was replaced by a dynamic import. Currently, the dynamic import has lots of text in here that gets shrunken when you're in production, so we don't put as much text. Oh, no, by the way, there is a line number and a file name where it comes from. Check this out. I forgot to show this. Is it which button to click? Oh, here we go. You see, if I hold the option key, everything becomes highlighted. And if I, for example, want to know where is this code, I click, and it takes you directly to the span that renders that code. Kind of cool, huh? But anyways, let's go back to our amazing button. So the amazing basically now got lazy loaded, right? So the $sign is all you need to lazy load a piece of code. That's crazy. But what if I want to run the code on a server? Now, when I click, it's not running here because it's running on the server. Thank you, Ayub. You're so good. I'm gonna have to have him come. You're probably asking, how much do I pay that guy? Lots of love. He works on love. That's all it is. So there's a way to basically pin functions permanently to a server. So we kind of talked about that. How are we doing on time? I've been talking for so long. I can show one more thing. Otherwise, one more thing. Okay. So the one last thing I want to show you is how do you load data on a server. So we talked a lot about how Qwik is unique and different, and hopefully kind of sold you on the idea that while it looks like regular React code and you can build just about anything you want with it, the way it works underneath is fundamentally different, right? So that's basically the value proposition we have for you here, is that write your code essentially in the same way you have been writing code with React in terms of the UI, the developer experience, etc. But the way it works is completely different, and it's going to be performant. And hopefully I've convinced you that it's not just me claiming it's performant, like there's technical reasons why it's fundamentally different, and how it approaches the problem in such a fundamental different way that it, of course, is more performant, because like, well, there's just less code ship to the client, and therefore it's better, right? One thing that you obviously want to do is you want to load code from the server. So let's talk about loading code for a second. And we're going to call it a day. Export const use data, because I am not imaginative in the way I name things. Equals, no, not. It goes route, loader. There we go. Okay. And let's say in here, I'm going to create a new file called data.json to kind of simulate, and I'm just going to say Adam, Miško, Manu, Sammy, right? This is our team. So let's say I want to load this. JSON, really? I know. Really? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, these are just strings, so keeping it simple. Okay. So because I'm on a server, I get to do things like read file, right? So I can say read file, and the file I want to read, if I remember correctly, so it's going to be in a root folder. So it's source, routes, server index, almost JSON, const, buffer. What is it? Data. Okay. Somebody's paying attention. Okay. Async. So we have buffer, and then we parse this, and this is going to be as string array, right? So now we want to get the data inside of the component, and so we say const date, use date. What? No, data. Okay. And notice the cool thing. So this, for those of you who know Next.js has get server props, right? This is essentially equivalent to get server props, but a couple of differences. First of all, the type information flows correctly. If I hover over data, it knows it's a signal of string array, right? The other thing is in Next.js, you get to get it through your props. And if you want to pass it to a component somewhere deep down, you have to prop drill all the way to where you want to go. Here you could, because it's a use method, you can just use it anywhere you want in your application, right? You don't have to be anywhere. And also you can have as many use methods as you want. So for example, inside of the layout, I believe inside of the layout TSX, we've declared a use server time loader. And so if you wanted to use it, we can just say const time equals that and import, and voila, that's it. I can have it, right? So I can have any data I want from any place in the system. And let's print out the data. So we do li. No, that's not how you do a loop. I forgot already how to do loop. Okay, data.value.map. What am I doing here? Li. Is a name, right? So name, right? So now if I go here, look at that. I got all the names in here, right? Now at this point, if you were in any other meta framework, because the meta framework has hydration, it would have to serialize. So Next has this thing called Next data, right? So that's equivalent to QwikJSON over here. But if you go to QwikJSON, notice what's not in here. The names are not in here. Because the system was like, yeah, but there is no way for you to re-render this particular code in the client, and so why ship the names, right? The names are not needed. If I, for example, say console, sure, we can do a time, and we can console.log data like this, right? Now, oh yeah, it still won't serialize because now it showed up, right? Now it basically had to serialize this data. So let's do a next thing. So let's say we want to have a filter. Filter equals use signal. Okay, and let's create an input. Type text filter, almost bind. Filter. Okay. Oops. Okay. So now we have a filter, we can type into it, and now we want to filter the list. So we can just say value.filter.name is name.index of filter. That value is not equal to -1, right? So now it filters. And now if you look into the state, you now see that it had to serialize it, right? So this piece of code right here, if I comment this out, this determines whether or not the list will be serialized or not, right? Because that basically determines whether or not the particular code can be re-rendered or not. Anyway, so I showed you how to load data. We also have actions, so you can send data back to the server. Anybody here uses Remix? Solid.js? Remix? Okay. So Remix has this idea of loaders and actions. So does Solid.js with Solid Start. Same exact idea. There are some nice benefits to it. I'm not going to go into details, but I think I've already talked for way too long already, right? Like, yeah. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let you ask as much questions as you want. Ask away on whatever you would be interested in. And hopefully, I've convinced you that it is fundamentally different. It's not yet another framework, right? I think a lot of people look at it, they look at it and like, oh, it looks like React. It's yet another framework. I'm not interested. My hope here is I convinced you that it is not yet another framework, and it is fundamentally a different approach to how web applications are built. And hopefully I've shown you enough that you convinced yourself that, yes, the way this works, the applications will just naturally be fast, because every step of the way, the framework is trying to figure out, like, how do I not ship code? How do I not ship code? How do I delay amount of work that I have to do? So that you get the correct behavior. And not only that, we put in hooks in there so that, like, you saw with the images, right? Where it like said, oh, you're doing a layout shift. This is going to be a problem, and auto fix it for you. So we're trying to basically have a framework where the easiest thing, the most obvious thing to do is actually the most performant thing to do. There is no, oh, let's build an application. Oh, crap, it's slow. Let's go refactor and improve it to make it performant. Like, that part just doesn't exist in Qwik, because the obvious and easy thing to do is also the performant thing to do. Okay, questions? Yes.
Okay. So for the Qwikify function that translates React into the Qwik component, is there other frameworks that can use this Qwikify? So is it only from React to Qwik, or I can use it for Vue or for Angular?
There is the React one is officially supported by us.
Okay.
There is a similar one for React and Angular. I believe there is one for Vue and for Svelte, but they're all community supported, and they're not as far along as the React one. So I think it's qwik.dev. So currently we have Qwik Angular and Qwik React are the two the repos that they're in the works, but other ones will follow. But they're all community. They're not the ones we take on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask, because what we all see here is that Qwik has a lot of benefits. It takes like a nice syntax as React, for example, and we have like all the benefits that React doesn't have. For example, we don't have like all that initial bundle that has since the virtual DOM and so on. But I wanted to ask, what would you think it could be a drawback for Qwik? Because we here all see like all the benefits that are like kind of revolutionary in this, but what do you think that it could be a drawback that if it's not present yet, it could be present in the future, that could make a little hard to adapt Qwik
so that's
to
a
the
good
developers?
Question. Yeah, that's a good question. So I like to think about it in two separate categories. There's the extrinsic drawbacks and intrinsic ones, right? Extrinsic ones is like, it's a new framework. You're not going to find experts in the area, right? The number of people available, it's, it's less mature, so maybe there might be bugs. Documentation, books are not written on it, although there's a person already working on a book. And so those are extrinsic things. And the reason I said it's extrinsic because over time, these problems will go away, right? So then you can ask, well, what's the intrinsic drawback to the system, right? What will never kind of change? And so on one way, you can say like, well, is there an application that I cannot build in a particular framework, right? And I'm going to say all the frameworks are essentially equivalent. It's not like you can be like, oh, this application I can build in I can build in Svelte, but I cannot build in React or vice versa, right? Like they're all equivalent, right? Whatever app is in your mind, you can build with all the different frameworks, right? So in that sense, Qwik is on par with them. Like there isn't really any particular thing that you shouldn't be able to build with it because it's a general purpose framework. But there are certain additional things you have to do. So when React went into the use hooks world, you had to learn new things, right? You had to learn that you cannot put them inside an if statement, inside of for loops. You cannot, they have to be called in the same sequence all the time, right? And there's only certain places you can place them inside of your function, right? And that's an additional load that you had to learn. But I would say that at this point, like you use it for a while, you're like, it's a second nature. You don't even think about it, right? There are new things you have to learn with Qwik. You have to buy into signals. Hopefully I've convinced you, like all the code I've written, that is pretty trivial, like, but there's still things that you have to learn. And there are places where you can fall off the signal reactivity world. We haven't really talked about it, but there are places. And the other thing you have to buy into is the $sign. And the $sign actually is a little tricky because the $sign forces a serialization boundary. Whenever I am capturing something inside of a $sign, the thing that I am capturing has to be serializable, right? And this is important because it means that you can't serialize everything. We serialize a lot of things. We can do hashes, maps, sets, obviously everything that's JSON, dates, promises even we can serialize, but we won't be able to serialize classes, for example, right? So you can't put classes inside of a state. It's not going to work, right? So there are certain constraints, but then again, if you think about it, if you're using Next.js, those constraints are already there because when you create a get server props, that already forces you that whatever you get out of get server props must be JSON serializable, right? So it's not like an additional new thing, but it is something that you have to buy into, and there are an extra constraints that you get with this particular system. I don't particularly think that the constraints are that big of a deal. I kind of showed you all kinds of things. At no point did we actually run into any of these constraints where you're like, oh yeah, you have to do something special. But there are constraints, like in that sense. I don't think these constraints actually prevent you from building anything. They may prevent you from like thinking about the problem in a slightly different way, right? So that's kind of the trade-off. But I think the performance benefit you get on the other side are totally worth it. Hopefully that answers yes. Okay.
Okay. Little question. When you were using Panda CSS, I think maybe I understood it wrong, but I think that you said that classes were split in different files or something like that when you were using Panda CSS.
Yeah. So let's see. So it's called atomic CSS.
Yeah, basically what I wanted to ask is, okay, I guess that JavaScript is, split it in very small pieces that are fetched as you use the website, but HTML and CSS are not like built, let's say like this.
You can lazy load CSS as well. There are different philosophies. We can get into it. I'm not sure if we want to get into it now, but so you can use style, which allows you to load a component. It allows you to load a CSS style manually. You can also use scope style that will manually load it and then scope it to just a component. The other philosophy is, but the problem with that particular approach is that you essentially have unbound the amount of CSS that you can load. The other approach that people have taken on is this idea of atomic CSS. And Tailwind is an example of that, where you basically have a fixed set of classes and you combine those fixed set of classes into what you want. But the Tailwind ends up like with this ridiculous class names, right? That a lot of people have a very allergic reaction to. But I mean, you can build a lot of stuff with, like, I don't think anybody says that you cannot build something with Tailwind. Like it can do a lot of cool things. But people have an allergic reaction to that particular thing. So the CSS is basically an alternative where it looks like you are doing JavaScript in CSS, but it gets compiled into, if I go to BCN, it gets compiled into a class name, right? So if I go now and say height, and I don't know, let's say width is 100, let's say 0. Notice it compiled it into two separate class names and split it out. And the idea is like, oh, you're using a width 100 or width 0, chances are there's going to be some other class somewhere else that also wants to use it. And so by combining it, you can build up the same thing. If you think about it, this is literally what Tailwind does. It's just that Tailwind does it in a very different DX.
So behind the scenes, there's like a style sheet that contains all these classes?
Yes, there's a style sheet somewhere. I don't know where. What is it? It's a global CSS somewhere. Let's... what is it? It's where is my image? Button. Okay, this one. So this string, where is the string found? No, you're lying to me. It's found somewhere. Okay, I don't know where it's put it. Oh, it's right here. It's global CSS. Oh, it's a separate file.
Yeah, it's not in line.
Okay. And so it created a width, height, P10. So anybody who wants padding just says P10 and gets it. But anyways, you don't think of it this way, right? You think of it in this format as a CSS, and then they have. You should read the documentation. I'm not an expert on style sheets, but like they have mix-ins and the way you like add things. They have traits and like bajillion different things in there. So it's a very powerful system. So basically, those people who love emotion, are there emotion people fans in here? Okay, so you get all the benefits of emotion without the problem of runtime that comes with it. And complexity of emotion is not very good for streaming. It's problematic for server-side rendering.
Can I ask a second question?
Yeah.
Really fast. Sorry. It's more like a more general question. It's maybe I'm getting something wrong, but isn't like the framework itself, which looks very nice and very promising, like a bit maybe too reliant on stable internet connection? For example, if I'm on the underground and I don't know, like looking at page build with Qwik, maybe the whole HTML and CSS has been downloaded and everything works fine, but I lost connection and I want to click a button and I'm not able to fetch the JavaScript that will make it run.
Mm-hmm.
So can this result in a bad user experience? Okay, if I could have a bad connection with React, nothing will get loaded, no internet connection, but this is misleading in some way, right?
No, but like remember the service worker prefetched everything. So
but as you were scrolling down.
No. Okay, so I'm gonna kill brand new thing. I go here, I'm not scrolling, right? I'm not doing anything. If you go to the application, look at this. All of the stuff is here. The moment you navigate it, everything was fetched. So this list contains everything you need for this page. And so you can go to the tunnel now and it's fine. It's just the network, there's two parts, right? There's a service worker that preloaded everything to the cache. And then there is the actual main thread that is now executing. And the main thread has nothing. And it's only when I start scrolling does this come over here. But this isn't causing a network connection. This is why it says service worker. This only pretends to do a network connection. It's actually the service worker is returning everything out of the cache. So you can go to the tunnel, turn off your Wi-Fi or whatever, and it still runs. Yes. More questions?
Okay, so I have my first question is about, well, I'm an architect, so the main deal for me is not to marry any technology. So I try always to, for example, considering the resources that I have in the project, in the team, the human part of the team, and Sierra, I tend to look for one solution over another. So, for example, what do you think is like the best fit for Qwik and the worst fit for Qwik when you try, for example, a certain product or maybe a certain structure that you need?
Okay. So first of all, as I said earlier, it's a general purpose framework, and you can build anything you want with it, right? The place where I think Qwik really fits well is anywhere where you want fast time to interactivity. So somebody sends you a link, you want to click on it, and you want to just see it, right? Like your CMS, your bank, your e-commerce, like places where like whenever somebody sends me a Google document, I look at that URL and I already recognize it's a Google document, right? And you're like, should I click on it? Do I want to spend 20 seconds of my life waiting for that thing to load, right? Did you have this experience where you like do mental arithmetic, like, is this worth a click, right? And I don't want you to have that, right? Like, I want you to basically just say like, oh, let me just click on this and the page loads, right? And so anytime you have that situation, you will have an advantage. Then people say like, oh, so if you have a long-lived application like Gmail, then you don't need Qwik. Well, the value there is less, but like, gee, wouldn't it be nicer if Gmail just loaded faster, right? Yes, it's amortized over the life of it, but still takes freaking forever to load, right? And so I think in many cases, there's a very good argument to be made that it's valuable to have Qwik. Now, there are certain applications where the value of Qwik is extremely diminished. Right? There are, for example, let's say you wanted to build a Google Chrome extension. That's 100% client-side rendered code, right? So do you get value out of Qwik? Well, the performance-wise, it'll probably be the same as anything else because it's all client-side rendered. You're not taking advantage of any of the SSR. But in that case, you can still make an argument that like, well, maybe the startup will be a little better because you can lazy load code, and if it's too big, you don't have to worry about it. But like, it's going to perform about the same, right? It's not going to be much different in that particular case. Oh, we didn't talk about one thing, which is that I keep talking about SSR, but you can just you can do SSG as well. You can take the intermediate HTML and send it into CDN and push it over there. I wanted to show you our homepage quickly. This is our homepage using Qwik. This is the same exact homepage using the previous technology that was built on using Next.js. And the thing to show you is Next.js performance. And we spent a lot of time making sure that this performs as well as we could. And Qwik performance, right? And so the way you see the difference is, let me show it to you in here. So let's go to Performance tab, and let's do a refresh. And give it a few seconds. And come on, do your magic. You can do it. Don't make me tell a joke. What? Come on. What is it stuck? Why is it stuck? Seriously, it got stuck. Yes, okay. Stop about now. Okay, so this worked. What? Okay, let's do this again. What? The whole thing, the whole tab died? I can't even kill the tab? What? The tab is refusing to die? Okay. Okay. Performance. Okay. Please. There we go. Okay. So let me zoom in on the first second of life of the page. This is, and remember, this is a fast computer. Okay, so here's the first second, right? 47 milliseconds of JavaScript execution. This is quick. Notice how much JavaScript is running over here. It's pretty empty. Not much is happening in here. This is Next.js. Let's zoom in to the first second of the life of the page. It's right here. 308 milliseconds. Remember, this is a desktop computer, right? And so if I look into here, look what's happening in here. This thing is just going nuts here. And if you hover over this thing, it says Next.js hydration, Next.js hydration, Next.js render, right? Next.js is just does what it normally does, right? Sorry, this is not necessarily Next.js. This is basically hydration, right? It doesn't matter that this is React. It could be Angular, it could be Svelte, it could be any framework you want. The same exact thing would happen, right? And so we are talking 300 milliseconds here versus, I can't even kill this tab, versus 47 milliseconds. So that's almost a 10x improvement. Also notice all of the execution of JavaScript are teeny tiny slivers, right? That just come in here. And I don't know if I can even show, let's see. JavaScript. Am I filtering? I'm not filtering. I feel like there should be more. Okay, so this is how much JavaScript is this? 200 kilobytes. Am I reading this right? And then if I go to JavaScript network, refresh, remove the filter, JavaScript, and 1.6 megabytes. Okay. And then you wonder why one is faster than the other. Other questions? Oh, page insights. So page insights, oh yeah, I already showed you this, right? The difference. And the main thing is, total blocking time here is basically non-existent.
Something that I want to add is that, for example, the thing you did with Qwikify, that's amazing, because that's one of the, I think, the worst things that happened for new frameworks when you don't have libraries, as you say, and you can just Qwikify whatever you need. That's crazy.
Yes.
And you even share the same state. So you can even create something like a micro front end, So I think that's
micro front end. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Quick dream demo. Yes. Okay. Sorry, ask your question, and I'll show you the microphone.
No, it was just.
Oh, you want to see the microphone? Okay.
Yeah.
So here is a microphone. I think Qwik is really, really good for microphone ends because Qwik has this property that it's just HTML, and because of that, so here is a URL of a microphone end that goes and talks to other URLs. So this URL here, okay. So this URL here, notice, just renders the menu. This one right here just renders the hero image, right? This one up down here is just the product, right? And below it is our reviews. And oh, by the way, the reviews didn't even load until they came into the, we started scrolling. Why do you not want to open a new tab for me? Okay, trust me, it's a separate URL. And so if you look into it, okay, let me make the HTML bigger. Let's go to like here, let's say, and if you go scroll up, where's the container? So there's this container, but there's more than one. Q container. Okay, here it is. So this div here represents a particular thing, probably the menu. Let's see, where is the next one? This is probably a shopping cart. This is the hero image, right? And this hero image is fully self-contained. Everything you need about that application is in that HTML. If you open it up, you will find that it has its own QwikJSON. It has its own base URL from where it will load its code. It has its own code. It could even be running its different version of Qwik. And because Qwik doesn't have a hydration, it's not like all of them will all hydrate all at once and create a problem, and now you need to have module federation, which is complicated, right? You don't need module federation here because like, well, it's not like you're going to interact with all of them at once. So it doesn't matter. And so I think Qwik is really, really nice. So the reason I want to show this, and the reason I call this the dream demo, is because imagine you wanted to build a Amazon website that's fully personalized, right? You want to come to a URL and you want to serve it out of a CDN cache, but you can't, because if I make a page for you, then it's going to be no good for anybody else, right? And so what you want is something in the front to kind of look at the cookie and say like, oh, you need the menu. Everybody gets the same menu. CDN cache hit. Right? Now I need the shopping cart. Well, I need to render the shopping cart. There's not much I can do about it. So let me kick that off. Okay. Now I need a hero image. Oh, you like, I don't know, 3D printing. So let me go to the URL that gets the 3D printing, CDN cache hit, bam, it's in here. Now you're looking at a specific product. Again, CDN cache hit, it's a popular product. We already have it in the cache, show it in here. The whole page got assembled. It's specifically for you, and no rendering actually happened. And of course, no hydration will happen on the other side either. Right? And if you combine this with out of order streaming, which is something that we don't yet have, but like it's on top of our list, then you could even have things like, oh, the menu gets sent to the browser, the hero image gets sent to the browser, the shopping cart is taking a while, but finally the shopping cart comes back, the product shows up, but inside of the product, we don't know how many we have in stock, so that's going to say loading for a while until we update it, right? And so you could build basically Amazon level experience without Amazon level engineering resources, right? And hopefully I've convinced you that none of this stuff is like crazy. Like it's pretty simple. Like every single step is a pretty straightforward thing. And so the really nice thing about Qwik is that it has this property that you can just concatenate the applications together, right? So if I go, actually just to prove a point, you know, if I go to this thing, this container represents the product, right? If I go and grab this container, copy outer HTML, oops, and then I go edit HTML, and I'm just going to copy a second version of it. Okay, so now I have the product twice because I made a separate copy. This button will add an item to the shopping cart, but why is it not adding? Okay, this one adds, and second one should also add. What? That doesn't work? What? My demo is not working? Why is the second one broken? That is weird. Okay, I don't know why, but like in theory, it should work, right? Because it's just HTML that never hydrated, and so if you have a second copy, that's fine, right? So what you have is you have this property that your individual components, or rather individual section of the app, are concatenable, right? Which is a property you don't get out of any other framework. Okay.
So how do you convince a team that has already a website, like, I don't know, Zapier or whatever is the users of Qwik? How do you get the manager buy-in? How do you convince, which is the effort, the cost of integrating when you already have something?
Yeah, so that's always super difficult, right? And it's always like, who's going to be the first person who's going to jump in and do it? I think the way this works out is that first, people try it on their own personal website. They build some kind of a toy and they say, you know, this is pretty cool. I really enjoy it. I like the ideas, right? The next thing usually what happens is that within a company internally, there's some internal site that has to be built, like something to see the uptime of some particular system or some dashboard or something like that. And so for those things, then people will start using it, and it's going to be more bigger, and they kind of learn like, oh yeah, this is actually a reasonable thing. And then only then do they say like, okay, you know, maybe we are replatforming our main site, and we already have some experience, and we can kind of do this, right? And so I think the people who are adopting it right now are people who really, really care about performance, right? There's a company who are one of the first people that adopted it, Rosa BE. It's a Belgian company that, notice how fast the site came up. That's crazy. You hit enter and the site's up here, right? And what they care about is they want to make sure they get as good of a score as they can on Google, because the thing they care about is that you're looking for a doctor you're in Belgium, you're looking for a doctor, you typed it into the Google, and they want to be the first hit. And the only way they can be the first hit is if they perform amazingly well, because then Google's like, oh, if I send people to this site, then there's going to be very little bounce rate, right? And so they actually started using it more than a year ago, and they were one of the first people that went to the production, and they absolutely love it. So the first people that really care about this are people who absolutely have to have performance, right? And I think over time, the bar is going to be lowered. Like at first, like performance at all costs, and then you kind of build your side projects, and you build maybe some internal stuff, and you realize, oh yeah, this is kind of nice, and I really like the DX, etc. And then slowly, at some point, you come to the replatforming, and you kind of get built like that. We currently have, I would imagine, about 100 sites that are public, that are running Qwik. I think out of those, I would say maybe 20 are like real sites. The rest of it is like people just trying it out. And then I know of another like 20 different companies that we have private channels on GitHub with them, and we're helping them build it. So their stuff is not yet public. For example, a company in Germany, which is equivalent to the Decathlon. So they sell sporting goods. I think it's called Sport Time. They're redoing it. They're going from PHP now into the JavaScript world, and they're using Qwik. They actually wrote a case study that's actually published on our site that you can read about like their experience with it. And so I think this is going to take time. But I think people, look, I don't know if Qwik is going to win. I would like it to be win. I think it's cool. I think it's got lots of ideas. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that we're not going to be doing hydration 10 years from now, right? That thing's got to stop. Like, it's crazy. Like, we cannot be just shipping more and more JavaScript to the browser and just assume that things are going to be okay. Because they're not. And so we need a different mental model. And, Qwik is not the only one who does this, right? There's Marco, there is Wiz, there is Marco is, that's kind of it in Qwik. Astro still does hydration. It's just they do islands, right? Like people are trying. People are coming to realize that this is a problem, and they're trying different approaches. I think approach such as Astro is good in the sense that you can use existing technologies and you don't have to relearn everything else. And so, it's a small delta, but you get small benefit, right? With technology like Qwik, it's a huge delta in terms of what you have to learn and, what you have to jump across, right? But you also get a huge benefit, right? And so I think over time, people will just kind of realize this. I think the other thing that's going to happen is that right now, everybody's site sucks in terms of performance, right? And so, a manager comes to you and says, make the site faster. And you go like, but everybody else's site is slow. Like, this is as good as you can do. And, Google is unreasonable. It's impossible to get good score on Google, right? That's basically the answer you get today. I think what's going to happen is like once sites start launching with Qwik and you get good performance, then it will be difficult for an engineer to be like, but everybody else's site sucks, right? Because now you have at least one or two or a handful of examples where like, well, no, not everybody else's site sucks. And I think what's going to happen is, nobody's going to tell the engineer you have to use Qwik. They're going to basically say, you have to make it faster, and your excuse no longer holds water because I have examples that showing that it is possible, right? And so nobody's going to force you to use Qwik, but like you're going to kind of realize that like, unless I use a resumable framework, I cannot get there, right? And so, chances are for the next foreseeable future, Qwik is going to be the only game in town. I'm sure other frameworks will come on. Maybe you'll use Marco. I don't know. Maybe you'll decide you're going to look into it and be like, okay, Marco's the thing I want to use. I don't know. But it's not. It's going to be something that's not hydration because you can't get those numbers with hydration.
Perfect. So if no more question, I want to say thank you to Miško.
Thank you for having me. I kept you away from your food for a very long time. I'm so sorry.
We have
I will be mingling around. Feel free to talk to me. I'm a friendly guy. I really am.
Yeah.
So just just ask away.
See, perfect. We have beers, water, Coke, and pizza waiting for you. And if you have any question, you can go to Miško or Layfair or wherever, guys. Thank you.